This month, as we mark the 45th anniversary of Black History Month, we must pause to recount our collective memory of the historical and present-day contributions of African American people in our United States of America. Why is this important to us all, and why do we celebrate it? And if you were born after 1976, you grew up observing Black history in the month of February. But do you know why we celebrate it? Did you know that Black History Month only became a national observance in 1976? Did you know that there is a specific theme of celebration selected each year? If you are aware of some of this information, and since I'm a teacher at heart, I hope you will indulge me in providing this brief lesson today, because I think it is important to understand the significance of how history, the stories of the past, potently impact us in this present day. The story of African American History Month begins with the fact that for many decades in the United States, it was rare to see any mention of Black people in the books and dialogue about African American history, or African American history. In 1915, two educated African American men and their followers worked diligently to gain recognition for this missing piece of history and establish the beginnings of what is known today as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. 7 years later, in February of 1926, they successfully launched what is then called Negro History Week. The week represented the birthdays of former President Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, the former slave who became a national leader of the abolitionist movement. This laid the groundwork for what would eventually become today's month-long celebration of the contributions of Blacks in the building of America. In honor of this month and the legacy of African American contributions to our nation and local communities, our student leaders, under the leadership of Kyle Smith, our Bloomfield College student government president, and in collaboration with our Greek Council, and the Center for Student Leadership and Engagement and Special Programs, has announced a series of events to join former Newark Councilman Oscar Sidney James II and others for a live virtual special titled, We Don't Need Permission. The Center for Student Leadership and Engagement and Special Programs has shaped the discussion around alarming statistics which affects our students and many staff members from our beloved community as well. During the majority of the past 50 years, Black Americans have experienced unemployment rates that, if experienced by the entire population, would be seen as recessionary. Historically, the employment rate for Black Americans has been approximately twice the rates for whites. That is the case today. 6% for Black workers and 3.1% for whites. The difference in the unemployment rate for Blacks and whites shrinks for college graduates. However, even in the strong economy that we currently have, the employment rate is 50% higher for Black Americans. We must add our voice to this discourse and help to change this narrative.
So We Don't Need Permission was established by Carl Sharif. Carl Sharif is a gentleman people can Google. He's my godfather. It was a concept that he started. He was actually the president of the Newark School Board in the 1970s, and just a very learned man. Not asking for permission is no way to trample on the rights of other people, but a shift in thinking. We don't need permission as a social justice, financial movement to combat barriers placed in the financial system within the United States to prevent people of color and other minorities from achieving the piece of the American dream. So one of the startling things that stands out to me always is the employment outlook for Black Americans, right? So again, many of you young people, we were told to come to college, go to college, get a degree, and then you're gonna come out and there's gonna be a good job for you to find. But that's not really the truth and the promise for Black people. And despite significant economic progress over the past decades, Black Americans experience far worse economic conditions than the white population as a whole. During the majority of the past 50 years, Black Americans have experienced unemployment rates that, where they were experienced by the entire population, would be seen as recessionary. Historically, the unemployment rate for Black Americans has been approximately twice the rates for whites. That is the case today, 6% for Black workers, 3.1% for whites. The difference in the unemployment rate for blacks and whites shrinks for college graduates. However, even in the current strong economy, unemployment rate is 50% higher for Black Americans. So one of the things in the misnomers that I want you to understand is that when graduating from college, there's not necessarily going to be a guaranteed job for you. That I really want you to start taking your time to think about those areas and focusing on areas, what it is that you really want to do, what it is that could really drive you every day if you had to get up and do it for the next 30 years, or what it is that you know you could find a passion, because that's what's going to really ultimately carry you through. Trying to live life just for money and just trying to figure out, what's my next biggest money scheme, I don't believe it's going to take you into a level of peace and satisfaction. And ultimately in life, that's what I'm searching for, and that I encourage others to search for. And not needing permission, for me, is the way to find that peace without having to ask others, how do I do it? It's creating the life for yourself, being the author of your own story, to be able to create that story. And a lot of times, as we can see from the outlook on the Black American future for employment, if we focus on just getting a good job and working, it's not going to take us to that level of peace. And I'm not here to be discouraging of dreams. I'm not here to dissuade you from going to college and achieving a college degree, because I have a college degree and I firmly believe in it, and I want my children to achieve the same levels of success in life. But I also want you to understand that the amount of debt that some of us come out with college with never allows us the opportunity to really achieve that American dream.
So, but Councilman, what are you suggesting to, let's speak to a focus group, Bloomfield college students, who come from areas like you and I, Newark, Trenton, first generation college students, not everyone, but majority of them. We are Hispanic serving population. We are officially the only, probably, I believe, PBI, the president will correct me if I'm wrong, in the state of New Jersey, predominantly Black institution. So when we read things like this under education, the wealth gap between Black and white households increases with education. Persistent segregation leads to large disparities in the quality of secondary education, leading to the worst economic outcomes. A step further for our EOF students, and I was one, high school graduation rates for Blacks and whites have nearly converged. And then it says the share of Blacks who are college graduates has more than doubled since 1990, from 11% to 25%, but still lags far behind whites. What's the motivation? What change do we need to be? And then Taryn, I would like to have you chime in on that too.
So, again, Terrence, I hope you brought me here to speak real, because that's the only way I can come. What changed is that we started to get degrees, and we started to actually move the shift in the paradigm, and we actually started to create our own communities. We had our own self-sufficient communities that were thriving, and we had first-generation college graduates. We created colleges, and we had a feeder system. And so what happened was people decided that had to stop. And so in changing the game, they started to make it as if that we had to go to other institutions, not our own institutions, right, to be educated. They riddled us with debt, and then allowed us to graduate, and then paid us less wages. And then they took our counterparts and told them they didn't have to go to college, and paid them more money and gave them jobs above us without college degrees.
I have a story to share about that with my grandfather, who was the first Black executive of Con Edison, and a similar situation happened. Taryn?
For me, I'm going to piggyback on what Oscar said. I think we have to get back to this notion of building our own. And that's my focus, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. There's nothing wrong with definitely going to school and getting an education. No one can take away the education that you have. but also the soft skills and the mindset that you learn at school, and transferring that to real world issues and problems as well. Building our own and having our own is a big factor when it comes to all factors of life, including home ownership, running a business, taking control of your life. And I think we need to get back to that where, like Oscar said, we don't need permission to do any of these things. And trying to find a way for me through entrepreneurship to kind of like bridge the gap between school and money and ownership, and that's the way to do it, right? Hispanics, Black and brown kids really do not have any problems with creativity, passion, resilience. I mean, we do that, since birth. So I think it's how do we take those skill sets and turn it into something that's generational and lasts long, and lasting a long time, and building upon that and giving back.
One of the issues that I see, right, is that our creativity gets blocked because we're focused on surviving every single day. And one of the things that I try to do with financial freedom is to ensure that the next generation can have the opportunity to dream, right, and create, because we are creative and we are the culture, right? And it seems like we always feel like we have to get away from our culture to survive. And it's really embracing our culture and illuminating that culture that really will allow us to be successful in entrepreneurship.
I agree, and they always say the mother of convenience, right? When it comes to invention, I think we do not have to stray away from ourselves to be an entrepreneur. I think in this day and age of Instagram, of being yourself, but we also have to undo generation of propaganda telling ourselves that we could actually be ourselves, right? And create something for our own and be okay within our skin without having to be someone else or assimilate someone else. So I think that kind of like as a separate topic too, we can deep dive into that too.
We have diversity week coming up in March, so I got you. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think creating something for ourselves is vital. If anything, this pandemic and COVID has taught us is to pivot, to broaden our horizon. Doing one thing is just not enough in this society. And trying to figure out how you could use your skill set to make money and make a difference.
So part of my thing is a two-part question, Taryn. I want to start with you.
Wait, can I put out a fact there before you go there?
I hope it's relevant.
I just want to.
But you're also the councilman, so go ahead.
It's very relevant. It's very relevant
Okay.
because I want you to, before you go,
Yes,
to
yes.
take this fact.
Okay.
Because one of the things that we don't even understand is the wealth gap in between our families, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't even know what the other side has because we have been segregated for years, and there's been a strategic plan to keep certain information from us. So there's one thing I just want to put out there, right? So that all the young people who are listening understand. The median income of Black families, $17,000.
And median is average.
Average
Yes,
income of Black families in the United States is $17,000. That is 1/10 of the median income for white Americans in this country. Do we really understand what divide is going on? We're talking about 17,000 compared to $171,000, and understand the difference in what people can do for their families with that gap.
So what are we saying? I mean, part of it is understanding the knowledge, right? Because in order to place yourself on the right side of history, in order to be instrumental in breaking the glass ceiling, which it seems like no matter how many we break, it's still more to break. The finish line constantly gets moved. I want to ask a twofold question. Both of you touch on it. One, as a college student right now, sitting at Bloomfield College, why, based on your statistics, why am I even doing this? Why am I spending thousands of dollars to prepare myself? And yet, the odds are constantly stacked against me, and the people in the rooms who can make the difference don't look like me, don't speak like me, don't speak for me. What are you suggesting that we do?
I think that's a perfect question, and I think that's multi-layered. Like you said, the people who are creating the game, right, and that are in the rooms that don't look like you, that actually make the rules, are saying that you do need a college degree.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of jobs that you apply for now that's just borderline entry-level position, you need a bachelor's degree, right? I think the biggest thing now is trying to figure out how to play the game and how to beat the game. So when it shifts and it's moving, that we could actually shift and move with it, right? So definitely kind of like, let's take for instance, Tulsa or Black Wall Street. There was still diversity. There were a lot of objections. There was a lot of crime against Black people. It was, I would say, it was even, racism was even more rampant than it is now, so to speak, right? But they built a substantial amount of wealth, and the answer is why. They built their own. The Black dollar stayed in the community longer. These are all tools that we could use to help each other kind of get out of the rat race, so to speak,
Right.
and build something for ourselves. But we also have to know how the game is being played to actually beat it, like anything else.
We hear that so many times, the game, the game, the game.
Yeah.
What game, first of all, is it multiple games?
So
Absolutely.
the
The game of life.
And is that the ultimate game?
Yeah.
And who's making the rules? Where's the black and white print? I shared when I was on the podcast with you, Oscar Sidney, is that there has to be, when you buy a board game, for example, there's rules in it. Some people make their own rules. You know, we can play spades, and we'll make our own rules, and we'll argue about what the rules are. Any of those kind of games. The rules are the rules. Who made the rules? And then this is the game, and still we make our own rules. So when we use these anecdotes, I like to say, give it a name. Call it what it is. And when we talk about millennials and the younger generation, they seem to have a lower tolerance. First of all, it's like an instant oatmeal, and I can say this because I'm a part of it, but an instant oatmeal generation. Gratification now.
Absolutely.
Results now. And so this struggle and this disappointment that comes with political engagement, civic engagement, is really about a disappointment in adults who have been in charge and in control. So this game can't be played without human beings who are just like me and you and everyone in this space, taking action to enforce those things that are hurting us or have an adverse action. What's your response to that? And
so I want to answer that question and your previous question, right? Your previous question, literally, if we don't get educated, the stats say 1 in 3 black men go to jail.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's what they're here for, right? Like, and I understand they want immediate gratification. I understand they saw the Migos at 19 and Bow Wow at 20 balling and Bentleys and everything, and you feel like you should have, Balenciagas and all that. But the most average people don't attain that in life, and they live a peaceful, happy, successful life. What I truly believe in this young, immediate gratification age group that we deal with is that we have to show them how to work hard for the things that they want, and that they can attain those things by working hard. And if you go back in time, of course, the things that glitter and gold and shine bright have been always the things that grab the attention of young people. Like chains and cars and gold and women and bottles of champagne and parties, and it just seems so great and enticing, right? But when all that goes, then what substance is left, right? What is there? And the one thing I want to say about enduring through the end, it is truly what our ancestors had to do. Our ancestors never had immediate gratification. They never thought about immediate gratification. They thought about enduring to the end, and they couldn't even see the end. And so we've gotten so far away from that because we've gotten certain rights and entitlements that we have just become to think like we're just like everybody else, and we're not, because George Floyd is an example that we're not just like, these stats that we're quoting show you that you're not like everybody else. So once you get that complacency in your heart and feel that you're just like everybody else, and you can just move to the suburbs and live a quiet life, that's when you're impacted. That's when the Trayvon Martin happens. And so, for me, you can never be complacent. You always have to fight. But you also have to understand that without education, we wouldn't be where we are, and we would never be able to continue to push the future generations if we don't get our education. So it's our duty. But I also expect others and the future generation to step up and do what they have to do.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about reclaiming the dream of Dr. King, which was our sort of theme as we celebrated Martin Luther King Day here at Bloomfield College. And I believe that this was probably the first time in years that the college had a celebration on that day, because typically we are closed. And I just thought it was a day that we should be open, and so did many of our student leaders, including our student government, who's very adamant about embracing the PBI culture of the college. What do you guys think that means as it relates to these statistics? Like, where are students from Bloomfield going from here after hearing statistics? Because I believe that many of our students are going to learn these statistics and that they are part of it for the first time. How does that not become discouraging? Or how does it become an enabler to say, I want to be on the right side of history, I want to be a trailblazer, I want to be a visionary, I don't want to just stand on the dreams of Dr. King and the quote, but I want to fulfill my obligation to ensuring it, because I understand that we can't legislate morality. But people that understand that you can't legislate morality, you can't put into law how to treat people, or you can, don't mean people will treat people that way. How do we hold people accountable? Because that's a part of what the problem I believe that we are experiencing.
Well, one of the things I like what Dr. Lemmy saying, is saying, look, he wants us to talk about the gap between wage earnings between high school graduates and college graduates, right? And I think it's important to understand that just leveling the playing field, we have to finish college. Like, we have to, like, part of the start is just finishing. I know it's hard, I know it's a struggle, but that's the struggle of life.
Sometimes I talk to
because
my peers, they don't understand.
It comes down to the opportunity of you being able to maybe be able to, because you're right there, right?
Well, what you're saying is we're taking those off the table, right? It's like a passport, right? If you want to travel, but so far, right? You need the passport,
and that's
right?
what I was saying.
Okay.
If the game masters are saying for you to enter the game, you have to have a college degree.
Right. Let's just, if they're saying that.
If they're saying that, right? And it shows if you go on LinkedIn, if you go on Indeed, for the job that you want, right? Entry-level position, a lot of times you need a bachelor's degree. So if the wealth gap is this, and you cannot get a job because you didn't go to college, and you cannot get this entry-level position to make $45,000, $50,000 a year, then the question is why college is off the table. It needs to be on the table. So you do need to finish it. You do need to say, okay, I'm going to play this game as best as possible, right? And the game change. It could be the housing game. It could be the parental game.
Right.
It could be any game, because as you grow as an adult, you shift, when games, right? When you actually get the job, it's corporate America game and politics and all of that stuff. So yes, going to college, finishing college and learning those soft and hard skills so you could implement it through your life is crucial. So then you could make the money to make the change and to actually lessen the gap as possible. And everyone has to hold themselves accountable.
So when we're paying college students minimum wage, and we also living in a time when the Republicans and Democrats, and sometimes for young people, they see Republicans and Democrats as white and black, a white and black conversation, literally about color. Is it really about that? And what's the connection to actual policy and politicians and your quality of life? And then your quality of life is about your options in life too, right? Or would you say different?
I think for me and the construct around, especially while I'm here to speak to entrepreneurship, a lot of times you don't have a say-so in something you do not own, right? So you could see that they always say this actual nation is built off of the back of small businesses, right? Take for instance, if you actually have stocks or whatever, you own something, I think ownership is super important. And Democrat or Republican or any political party is always talking to some form of ownership. And you have a say based on your level of ownership and where you are within your life and the accountability. And I think based on where you are in life, sometimes it may be swayed, but I don't necessarily think it's a color thing.
So
I think it's just politics and where you are, you know? Because the more money you make, you can say, hey, I might want to be a Republican to save more of my taxes or home or, you know, whatever it is.
Because we associate those values typically with Republicans.
Right. That's very surface, but not the undertale of really what that political house is about.
Yes, ma'am.
You know?
Sydney?
one of the things that I agree. Well, I feel like that we have to shift away from that game of political Democrat and Republican, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about, to me, self-preservation, right? And so whether I'm a Black American, I'm a white American, I'm an Asian American, I'm an Indian American, I'm a Native American, I want to see my children thrive, other children that look like my children and that play with my children thrive. Mm-hmm. And it's not always juxtaposed against you. I do believe in situations that it is juxtaposed against you. But I believe in some situations it's just a yearning for your child to succeed, and you'll do anything, right? So we saw those parents that cheated, that would cheat for the SATs, right? To get their kids into.
Which parents was
to get to college?
Which parents?
They were wealthy, celebrity.
No, it's important to. Like I said, we have to give things a name, right?
Context is
and context is very important.
Yes.
And I like to say that Black people are probably one of the most forgiving, if not the most forgiving races ever, because people may not think we do, but we tiptoe around how we feel. We tiptoe around giving things a name. We didn't see Black families doing that.
Right.
We saw white privilege
They're white
doing
privilege
that.
families.
And it was being enabled in their children to pass it on from generation to generation. There's nothing wrong with saying that.
Right.
Okay.
No,
and because they never thought it was actually a crime, whereas Black people
you go.
Black people look at everything as what is the outcome of my decision, and can it land me in jail? Can it land me to be punished? Can it land me whatever? They're not in that construct. So even if they do a bad thing, who's to tell them that it is actually a bad thing?
Well, we don't have a choice. Look at Fred Hampton. I mean, look at Judas and Messiah. You had young Black men in their 20s that started chapters all throughout the country, and the CIA decided that they were more of a threat to this country than China or Russia at the time. That's ridiculous. Like, you literally focus the entire resources of the CIA and the FBI to take out 20-year-old Black men who were talking about we don't need permission.
I think for me, this is one of especially what can be valuable for our students. And like I said, we share this and we send it out to the community and kind of promote it as a show. In a sense, not just a live moment. Dr. Laming is saying there's $1 million, almost $1 million gap.
That's
in
right.
terms of,
That's right.
What is he saying? The lifetime earnings. The
Lifetime earnings.
Correct.
Lifetime earnings.
That's right.
Between a high school graduate and a college graduate.
Right.
We are also living in a time where college students are working at Amazon stuffing freezers and making minimum wage. Why isn't the opportunity being provided to our children of color? Why aren't they being paid their wealth when they come back from college? Is that a part of the disconnect? Because we do have educated young Black people who do go to college, who are qualified to make a certain amount. Why aren't they getting those opportunities, and why aren't they making that money? Why is it that more of us are going to school, in other words, and yet less of us are still seeing that same outcome? Is it us that's making bad decisions, perhaps?
Absolutely not.
Is it a combination of both? Or
And
is
the debt.
it
And the debt that
lack of that the finish line keeps getting moved for people of color?
The finish line.
That the standard raises when we're never good enough, you know, it seems. So is that, and I want us to touch on that and talk about that, because I feel like some of our students can feel that way at
And
times.
also our institutions are not deemed as good enough as other institutions, right? Whereas I'm sure the academically curriculum is above and beyond, right? You know, or even on the same playing field. So also what other people look at as, okay, have you been to this college? You know, where's your degree from? You know,
But
I
that's
can't tell.
another example just to create the divide.
Exactly.
Because you can learn the same thing in certain schools. Like one of the things people always like to say, right? There's not enough. The college is not for everybody. I tell them I beg to differ. I say there's enough colleges to fit everybody if you find a school for you. And each school is excellent based upon what they are there to nurture within you.
Right, but there's a propaganda around that, right? And
Absolutely.
now that we also have to see like who is in that HR department, who is looking at your resume, who, you know what I'm saying, who is looking at your name, who could pronounce your name, who is not biased, who is not part of this privilege and systematic racism. So there's so many layers to it that you know.
I think that's just such
really,
a profound point, especially for here. And then I want to see if anybody
So
has
who could
questions.
pronounce your name,
who could
right?
pronounce your name? I mean, you know how many times you know, before I was an entrepreneur and I used to actually fill out job applications, and you know, when you put in your college, it would automatically pop up. I went to Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. Medgar Evers, the name
Yes.
of said man,
The
civil
history,
rights.
the history.
Right, it would not populate. I had to put it in. So imagine that as a black historically, you know, of course not historically, but a black college based in
That's
Brooklyn.
right.
I have to type it in.
Yeah.
Correct? So just think about that and what does that mean.
And many successful people have come through there.
Absolutely.
Like
absolutely.
I know all exactly.
But who would deem it worthy?
Worthy.
Correct? And again, who is behind that HR office? Who is part of that
That's
company, the corporation in which you are applying for? And the slew of things and barriers also within that particular job or in that corporate structure, right? Or that organizational structure. Think about Amazon like you use as a structure, right? A lot, and I'm not sure of the statistics, but how many black and brown people actually work for essential jobs and they're the lowest paid jobs, right? That's out there that's making our economy run every single day.
Or not getting the opportunity for mobility
And advancement.
and advancement. And so I'll share two things and get your response on that. And then I want to see if you have any questions from either. We're still getting used to the Zoom and Facebook. I forget about my Facebook people sometimes. We have some people on Facebook who are asking certain things too. But one of the questions that I guess I would, I'm getting a little bit. One of the things I would ask is, what is really the answer? Like, if there was three things you would say tomorrow, we should wake up and do different. And I know one of them is going to be giving one of our students $1,000 scholarship or apprenticeship type of program where they'll be able to not just start their own business, but they'll be mentored and coached as to how to properly start their own business. So I know that's one part of it because we kept talking about ownership. But if we identify three things, and then I'll share my two testimonies in terms of my grandfather encountering the same thing before I was born at Con Edison in New York. And a story around our vice president of academic affairs, who's new. And one of the things that I admired about him was when I got the opportunity to meet him was after probably his interview phase, and it was kind of like deciding between the last two. And he said, well, one of the things that we have to do different, because we talked about the fact that Bloomfield is, Dr. Evans, I may be off a little bit, is 73% African American, but yet the only 13 or 12% of our faculty is black or of color. And so can you imagine when you have first generation college students who come, and all the different cultural barriers you can have with that, how that can lead to then disciplinary issues in the classroom and misunderstanding, and how that can play over to student affairs. One of the things that I really respect and love that he said during that session that we had, and I can tell he wasn't trying to impress just anybody. He was talking to the whole group because the audience was very diverse. It was students, it was staff, it was faculty. He said, we got to stop putting the same people on the committees. Because if he could have said if you put a corny person on the committee, they'll choose a corny person. So I like that. I thought that was so profound, and I had never heard really anyone mention that outside of anyone of color. He's a white man, and he was able to say the approach is wrong. The idea of keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result is stupidity. And I'm going to be that leader to bring something different. So does that play a role in that? And you touched on it. You said the selection and hiring process. Talk about that.
Right. If no, like you said, right? So if Bloomfield is, let's just round it off as 70% black, and the staff and the administrative staff, right, is only 13%, then culturally, how do you speak to your predominantly masses of your school? You do not understand the barriers of entry, you do not understand the cultural, you do not understand the lingo, you do not understand the swag, you do not understand the frustration, you do not understand the attitude and all of that stuff. So which means that how much can you help the students? And it's the same thing that goes for, how can I say this, corporate America. So if you are in a corporation like Amazon and all the top leaders, there's no diversity, right, on the leadership board or the hiring board or the HR department, then there's no understanding, there's no giveaway. There's not to say, okay, this person didn't go to this particular school, right? Or say, for instance, Google, right? I'm sure it's tons of people that's going to Harvard or Yale or Princeton to say, okay, let's look at other schools. If there's a diversity there, like, you know what? That college I know have a great entrepreneurship program or a IT, program. Let's look at that. Let's look at that candidate, their background. Maybe if they're from, let's say Jamaica or something like that, they might have a sense of resilience or tenacity. What have they been through in life to prepare them for this work environment that's tedious? Experience also plays a huge part, other than education. And I think Black and brown people, we're disregarded from our experience, but people always want to use our experience in Black History Month, which is such a gap, right? Because if I'm going to work for something that I need to put forth multitasking, teamwork, and being a people customer service, right? If I was a single mom, I multitask, I'm a team player, I have to talk to different people to get what I want, customer service. So I think we have to really shape our mind of culturally what we bring to the table, and it's not just education, and it's a whole experience, and our experience also trump kind of what we bring to the table sometimes, and we have to be looked at as a whole, not just part and parcel of something.
I want to speak from the perspective of the representation is so critical and so important.
Representation in terms of
the representation in the classroom, the representation in terms of advisors, the representation in front of what you need as a young person. I can speak from the young Black male perspective, trying to figure out. Representation is extremely important. Situation is very clear. I was 19 years old, going into 20. I was a junior in Villanova. I had not designated my major, and by then you're supposed to have a major. I was in second semester of junior year, and I had been able to maneuver through the system without designating a major because I was just trying to avoid different advisors and different things and just stay in that gray area, right, and get through. And I got called out by somebody because I had exaggerated so many stories to the white faculty advisors and faculty members, and I used to go in. Crazy, it was bad. But because of the stereotypes that they believed of our community, they let me get away with this stuff. And it wasn't until the Black man that called me, I was like, that's nonsense, you're lying. And almost failed me. And really called me, and it was crazy because it was like, I went in the office, I was like, bro, I aced the midterm, I aced the final, why do I have a D? And he ran it down to me. He goes, you missed, because it was a night class, and I missed like 6 night classes, so which is like most of the semester. And it was called Black Politics. And he knew that I knew everything because the midterm and the final I aced, but I failed every quiz in between. And he goes, I gave you that D to show you the same level of effort that you gave me. Because even though you were trying to play the law of averages in my class of how much you had to show up and didn't show up and just ace your midterm and your final, I wanted to show you that that's not going to get you through here. And it wasn't until him that called me out. I was just skating through Villanova. And I was using the poor kid from the hood anytime I got in trouble to skate through when I was just getting over because I was just trying to play this game.
I think that's very...
And representation of people who knew me called me out and made me start being great.
Yeah.
And stop just playing small.
And why was that, in retrospect, 2 points, why was that important to you? And then 2,
because I could have played small for the rest of my life.
You could have, thank you for telling the truth about that. We are great, destined to be great.
We are great.
And it goes back to Dr. Lambie's question. He said, how do young people, first generation college students, build a network to support for life success? I think that that's an example of what Dr. Lambie is. You are, yes.
So your 3 points that you asked for is exactly what I agree. I said that. I said it's education, because we have to complete the education, right? Because then we don't complete, and then we're still riddled with the debt. And so now you don't have the degree, but you're still paying for the degree, right? Networking. We have to continue to network. We have to continue to open ourselves up. We have to continue to embrace each other and to keep, and beyond college. Like me and my high school friends and my college friends, we still network in terms of business and things. And last, because we network beyond college and high school, we practice in cooperative economics, where we invest in each other, or one of us will invest who has it, and then the rest of us will pay them back, but to build up to where we need to be. And when you don't have the access to capital or that angel investor that could just write the check, cooperative economics is a way to mitigate some of the access, the lack of access.
Sydney, I think that those points are so important to our population, but I think in general, these are conversations that people of color don't typically have, right? And I think that what you're touching on sheds light to the people who don't know how to do that. There's people who heard the term networking before. How do I do that? How do I build the confidence to do that? How do I constantly put myself out there when I'm young and being knocked down each and every time? Some of our students are thinking that or will think that. How did you guys do it? How do you muster up that confidence to compete amongst and within a field that perhaps that you may think or maybe perhaps you weren't qualified for?
So I have to be 100% frank. Like I stated before, there's no shortage of, I think, confidence, resilience, creativity, passion with, people of color, black and brown minorities, I think it's a level of accountability. And we all have to do something. So if you have to do something, why not strive for greatness? Right? So there's a difference between saying that, okay, I am not confident, and we have to seek what we want. Right? So if you're hungry, you're going to look for food. If you want to network, especially this day and age where our phone, we're literally walking around with a laptop every single day in our hands. And I think we have to hold ourselves accountable to what we want. So if you really have a confidence issue, you can literally type into Google how to be more confident, right? We have to learn how to take initiative and go after what we want. Sometimes it is easier said than done. I definitely understand that, especially when life is knocking you down every single minute. But we get back up. And it's funny enough, in entrepreneurship, is your success is kind of based on the amount of times you fail, right? And people don't talk about that. I think now it's so easy to see the glitz and the glam of everything, but it's a facade, right? If you really looked at how many times that person has failed, like, it's kind of like the book Think and Grow Rich, right? So it's kind of like, yeah, you're digging, you're
First of all,
digging.
good reference.
Right.
Repeat that book again. Thank you.
Think and Grow Rich, right? So it's like if you're digging for something, it's just like when you're just about to hit that pot of gold or to hit your idea, sometimes we give up and we just have to go again and keep at it. So failure is not something that we need to run from. We need to hold ourselves accountable, keep going, like we always have to do in life, right? One feet after the other, and do something that moves the needle forward and move your life forward. And finding what that is. I think finding what that is the hard part.
Who do you?
So
3 points.
let me stay on this
Go
point.
ahead, and then we'll conclude the 3 points.
So I'm just gonna explain to you guys right now who I am. I'm a real estate developer. I own real estate property in Newark, New York, Jersey City, Florida. Currently investing in Detroit and looking to invest in 2 other cities in this country. I'm a political consultant. I'm a blogger. I'm an educational consultant for educational reform organizations throughout the state. And I say all that to say, I am scared every single day when I wake up.
Of what?
But I pray to God that I can fail at everything that I'm doing, or one thing that I'm doing, or all of it, right? But I pray to God to give me the strength to get out of bed, and then I believe the rest is up to me during that day. And I still go to God and I find times to talk to him throughout the day, but I feel it's literally up to me to overcome all the obstacles that are gonna come at me every day. Because if I say, this is what I want, then I gotta go get it. And the one thing that I know for sure, success will take a shot at you. No matter what. No matter who you are, no matter what race, no matter what color, no matter how powerful, no matter how strong, success is gonna take a shot. How are you gonna respond?
I kind of started off this, and I know we got interrupted about what we don't need permission meant, perhaps to me. I want to conclude with 3 points, and we'll end with the entrepreneur piece, because that's one of the deliverables that our guests are coming with today. But when we say we don't need permission, not just from your perspective, but when you're talking to the younger generation, what do you want them to understand, Terry and Sydney next?
I want them to understand that no matter what anyone tells you or how you feel, you're in control of your life. You are in control of your life. You are the master of your ship. You are the captain of your ship, and you decide where that vessel is going to take you. And I think, there's this saying, that is this, we're not all in the same boat, but we're all in the same storm, right?
I like that.
Right?
Yeah, I like that.
So at the end of the day, we all have a vessel. We all going to a destination, wherever that destination is. And you can't spend time looking at somebody else's yacht when you have a canoe. You just have to work your canoe the best way you could work your canoe, right? And it might take you longer. And sometimes we look at it as, oh my God, that person is there, or that person is doing it, or you're looking at it in front of you or behind you. Just work what you have, because you have a vessel to get where you gotta go, and that's self. And work on self all the time.
I like that a lot. Cindy?
Just really sticking to that point, you have to endure to the end. That the only way of not needing permission is understanding that you're going to be in this fight. And that there's a joy in the struggle, that people don't learn to find that joy in the struggle. There's truly a joy in the everyday. And the only thing I can go back is to my answers. I'm reading a book right now called Love is the Way. It's amazing. And part of the chapter, he talks about his grandmother, who was a sharecropper. And he talks about our ancestors. And he talks about the lack of hope and faith that they had, right? But they never, he talks about the 2 services that they went to, right? That the slaves would go to one service that told you that you had to be a good slave and be a slave, and that's what the Bible says. And then they would go back and have another service where the Bible told them that they were meant to be free, they were meant to be great, and that they are God's child. And that was the thriving force that they used over the years to believe that they weren't slaves and that they could be free. And so we don't need permission is a way to muster back to that strength, that vision, that foresight, to not be caught up. They were smart enough to go to the church, right, and let Master say whatever he wanted. Because then we're going to go back and do what we need to do to get where we need to be. And to make sure that our future generations don't believe that they are slaves.
I think that that's something that I won't entertain here too much, but I would say go and really investigate the story of Harriet Tubman. And not just what they tell you on the surface. Touch on what Sydney was talking about and why she took those particular actions, and we'll understand what Malcolm X, or was it Martin Luther King was talking about. He said, if I would have known I was leading my people into a burning building, I may have done something different. And so it's important to know the whole history, not just the part of the history that makes you feel good, right? Because as a people of color, we feel good, you know what I'm saying? And we like to feel good, but if it's not all good, and we're used to living there. We're used to wearing the pain and living with the pain. Lord knows our women do. As Women History Month is coming up. What advice, if you said 1 or 2 or 3 points, tomorrow when you wake up, I urge not just Bloomfield College students, because let me say this, one thing I love about working at the college is that the students and staff have a lot in common, and that's important. The testimonies are not far apart in terms of experience and dealing with different challenges and the things that we're talking about. When you wake up tomorrow, and if that person was to say, if there's 2 or 3 things that I need to look at or do to be instrumental in addressing this issue, right? Because this is not something we should be just talking about. We got to take an action. I won't even say advice, because sometimes I like to hide behind this. We're not qualified to give advice. What suggestions would you give?
Dare yourself to be great and love yourself.
Why is it important to love yourself? That's
because I think everything begins and ends with self. And I think when you deal from a place of self and you love yourself, there's certain things you will go after, there's certain things that you won't tolerate, there's certain things that you want to prove, not to someone else, but yourself. So you want to prove that you're qualified for that job, you could get that job. You know, if you tell yourself that you're great, you're going to give yourself your pep talk. Confidence doesn't mean that you're not scared. It's just going after it anyway. Right? So I think knowing thyself, learning thyself, loving thyself, understanding that you deserve all that you want and more, if you have that mindset every single day, it doesn't matter what anybody else says.
I love that.
Because you're going to say, I deserve it. And I want it. And I'll go for it.
Write your own story.
Period.
Yes, ma'am. Sydney?
I didn't become successful until I started searching for my purpose and not searching for money. So I understand that we grow up in communities where we don't have money, we see our mother struggle, we see our family struggle, and the only thing we want to do is just get money. I would beg you to wake up every day and to pray to God, to whatever God you pray to, whoever you pray to find purpose. Because if you find purpose, I'm 100% that you will find money.
You know, part of this conversation was really discussing our history and how we can be instrumental in being the difference, living the change, being the change that we want to see, not just expecting it, right? And so I want to thank you both for the entrepreneur part, which I want to end with and talk about, because that's going to be the sound bite, right, of the give back. We didn't just come here to talk. All right, and you guys are really special to me, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to meet you, Tamara, because when you clarified earlier when Councilman Judge was here, this is what I'm here for.
Right.
That was the most, the content is important. It's important for young people to understand what we're up against and what we're facing and why people in professional roles are fighting for them and why they need to fight for each other. But at the same time, we also just need what I would call just that human interaction. Outside of the statistics, what am I supposed to do? Being vulnerable enough to say, I don't know what to do. And that's okay too, right? And so you can touch on any of these points, but part of what we covered today and why this was important was because we're talking about 50 years, and we talked about the first, the right to vote for men, for blacks, the right to vote for then women, and then even just solidifying or revisiting right to vote just 50, 55 years ago is something that I think the younger generation, because even my generation, has not grasped. We got a lot of work to do. You can't just live off of the march of Dr. King and the dream of Dr. King. You can't just live off that, because something is not going to be automatically handed to you, which I think was pretty much the sentiment of everybody's comments. You got to go after what you want, and no, you don't need permission to do that. You got to be qualified, you got to be committed, you got to be capable, you got to be competent, but you don't necessarily need permission. So we leave here today understanding that during the majority of the past 50 years, Black Americans have experienced unemployment rates that, if were experienced by the entire population, would have been seen as a recessionary. And so what is it saying? It's saying the same thing that COVID has been saying. As long as it's us dying from it and getting it, we don't have to be accountable. And what Councilman James said, maybe it's all right for some people. What are you going to do to change that statistic? What are you going to do to move that needle, move the ball down the field, right? Historically, the unemployment, meaning we got a lot of stuff for people of color to do, right? It's a lot of work to do. Historically, the unemployment rate for Black Americans, which speaks to what Dr. Lamy was speaking of earlier, has been approximately twice the rates for whites. How is that? Why is it not the same? Why is it at all? Is the follow-up questions to conversations we're having. And that still being the case today. It says 6% for Black workers and 3.1% for whites. The difference in unemployment rates for Blacks and whites shrinks from college graduates. This part is what compelled me to want to have this conversation on this particular platform.
I'd like Terry-Ann to finish and make the last point, but I'd like to make a point before that and just say, my point's very simple. I was recently watching a podcast that Tyler Perry was involved in, and he was very clear about his journey, the struggle, and the fact that he focused to remain ownership. Because if it wasn't for him to remain ownership, he wouldn't be able to create the opportunities that he's able to do now.
For
other Black people.
That's the
all the way
as
down.
well.
Other Black.
As well.
Correct.
Tyler Perry don't have all Black cast now.
No,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
But in the first start of the plays, it was just us.
Playing them well.
It was clear.
Paying them
He
well.
said it was just us. It was me and my people, and it was about them eating, us eating, everybody. He said as he grew, even when he went to Hollywood, people didn't know who he was, but he had made $75 million off Medea from us and our community, and Hollywood didn't know him. Mm-hmm. So that's the fact that we don't need permission. We have enough in our community where that spark,
Great example, yeah.
that sparked the Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta that employs over thousands of Black Americans.
Yeah.
And he didn't move them to Hollywood. He made them come to Atlanta and say we can build our own.
Right.
That is, we don't need permission.
And so where are we going next? We have an opportunity to speak on what we say. We have an opportunity to help a student or some students with planting a seed. Talk to us about that, Tara.
Well, I think my back on ownership, and when it comes to entrepreneurship, my biggest thing is building your own, and to the point of why the unemployment rate, sickness is more rampant in our community. I think we have to, again, just build our own, create our own infrastructures in every single thing that we do. that could help our community. So we do need, you know, when it comes to COVID, we need more Black doctors. We need to understand more things when it comes to Black health, correct? Underlying issues in certain communities, and how do we look at different alternative medicine to help our own. And when it comes to the unemployment, I think we have to look at what we own. If you own it, chances are you're not going to fire yourself, right? So I think we have to look at the picture as a whole, and just hold ourselves accountable, not to just the propaganda that we hear oftentimes that's being marketed to us, that's telling ourselves that we're not good enough, that, you know, all these statistics that keep us down as well, that we could believe in and just strive to be great. And I think entrepreneurship is one of those cornerstones of life that I think we need to dive back into. And I think it needs to be a fundamental teaching and learning and course in Black and brown communities from, you know, adolescence age,
right,
to be quite honest. So when you do get to college, the conversations is different. You know, if you're being told that you could start a little lemonade stand, by the time you get to college, we're helping you write your business plan for a Fortune 500 company. You know, and you already feel confident because you had a lemonade stand.
That's right.
But we're starting at college level to get them to feel confident, and that's not necessarily the trajectory, right? We need, and also I will say this, how we govern our lives, and also as parents and as a culture, we also have to leave room for our people to grow and to take risks and to expand, because that's life, right? That's life. And the more mistakes and the more you fail, you realize what you need to do, what you could do better. And I know sometimes we do not have the opportunity to fail because the odds are stacked against us and we have to do what we have to do.
Yeah.
But there's a brilliance in having creativity and being able to just laugh and just to dance, right? And to be able to sit wherever you want and do whatever you want, because then that translates to, I'm okay with taking risks.
That is the confidence booster.
Right, that is a confidence
Yep.
booster, right? And you're okay to be creative and to do those things. So I think it's imperative. I definitely want to bring back more entrepreneurship to, you know, to colleges and other, you know, schools. And I think we need to work on building our own, creating our own, whatever that may look like for everyone. It's different. And I think that would bridge the gap in so many ways. Ownership, you know.
So let's talk about the entrepreneurship part, or the apprenticeship part of the We Don't Need Permission program, and why, and a part of why we are not just having this conversation, but Oscar, the follow-up. And so we talked about $1,000 and how some of that would be used to start a company. Go into that.
So, because again, I'm just not about talking. Talking just runs us into the ground. So, with your office, I'd like to create a criteria for students to submit. I don't know if it's going to be an application or an essay, but what I'm saying is that through myself, and I'm sure there's going to be other people that want to be involved with it.
Dr. Lamy, for sure, I'm sure this is right up his alley.
But we want to put up $1,000 where Terry Ann will then help you, you know, coach you, kind of get you to a point.
Not just give you money, is what you're saying.
No,
say
the
go do something.
$1,000. The $1,000 is for your LLC to be established.
And you will help them establish those things, or we will help them establish those things.
We will help them establish those things. We will literally take them to a point where the $1,000 you'll see with $1,000, and the remainder of whatever's left after all the expenses should go into the opening of the bank account.
And then how does them still finishing this race and getting their college degree complement that?
I definitely think it's a skill set and a soft skill set that you learn in college. And also I've created an interactive initiative that I want to actually partner students with an entrepreneur and a creative that can take them through that process, right? Of what to do. Yeah, I have an LLC, but what does that mean? I have a bank account, but you know, I want to be a makeup artist, or I want to be a photographer. What is the day in the life of that creative person?
Career exploration, walking them through that, I love it.
Correct, right? And it's more of an interactive hand-holding process for them to know, not just in theory of reading something and doing that process. So we're working out the kinks of that, but definitely that's part of the course and getting them through that process. of knowing what to do after they graduate.
So you hear that Dr. Lammy, Leah out there, Leah, you know who you are, why I'm calling you out. Also Lisa St. Hilaire, and our newest member over there in Career Services too. We have a team that is really committed to bridging the gap between not just having them have an academic journey here, but a mentor. And not just, and it's very ambitious, not just the freshmen, not just the sophomore, but every student to have a mentor. How impressive would that be? And then on top of that, to plant those seeds of not just getting your degree and not being afraid to also be an entrepreneur. I always say Ryan Seacrest can earn 10 checks at, legitimately, and wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. But in black communities, we say, go be a garbage man, go be a lawyer, go be a teacher. It's only one thing. Instead of being cultivating our students, our young people to be everything they're qualified to be. Because that's truly how we build wealth, right? And so to the Bloomfield College community, this is an opportunity for us to come together around a matter or a topic that impacts many of our students. It impacts many of our staff, folks, and probably administrators and faculty too. As an administrator here at Bloomfield College just a year, I have experienced many of the things that we are talking about over time, both in my personal life and professional experience. And so I want to thank Taryn and Councilman James for being willing to have the conversation, to give things a name. When we talk about things in an ambiguous way, or in not a matter-of-fact way, I think we do a disservice, not just to the legacy of those that had to tell it like it is, that had to die for telling it like it is, bleeding. Hopefully none of us have to do that. But that we can push this forward, that we are not fighting. There's nothing wrong with the younger generation fighting battles, and we have to learn how to do that. There is something wrong with fighting the same battles that was fought 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. And so you guys being willing to be a part of that, helping us to prepare our students to attain academic, personal, and professional excellence so that they can function in a multicultural society, that's something that as a student I learned and has never left me, the mission of this college, which is why it's such an honor to be here working again and to have you guys here, because I know Sydney is, and I've gotten to know you, and I already knew you came here with the business side in your hands, saying I want to give these students more, that you are truly committed to not just our students, but people of color. And it's okay to say that because we need it. Black lives matter, and we need it. So that's just more. Thank you.
I don't believe in empty promises. I don't believe in coming and just preaching, right? So as we talked about the program, it really was just organic.
Yes.
It was organic that we're gonna find one student. We can't do it, but we can definitely pilot with one student, and I think it can be an amazing program for entrepreneurship. I'm interested to see where it goes, and like I said, the $1,000 is a no-brainer. That people are willing to, that myself and others are willing to put up just to ensure the opportunity of somebody to get that opportunity to figure out if it's something they want to do or not. Because a lot of times we never have those opportunities when we're young.
Before we close out, any final words? How can they reach you? How can they talk to you?
You could email me at events, events@dreamplan, events.com. You can follow me at Dream Planet Events at any single platform you want. You can DM me, you can email me. Yes, and I'm here as a resource to pretty much, pick my brain of what you want to do. If you want to start a business, I'm here for you. If you already have a business and trying to figure out which way to go, I'm here for you as well. And if you just need some coaching and some time to figure out your business and trajectory of your business, or even in COVID to pivot your business, right? I'm here as well. So again, Terry Ann Freeman is my name, and my business is Dream Plan It's Events. And yes, my email is events@dreamplanitsevents.com.
Thank you so much, Terry. I really appreciate the opportunity to sit with you today. Yeah. Any final words from you, Councilman?
All I can say is God is good. That's all I will say. And the sooner that we learn that we are great and that we are children of God, we will stop trying to force things, and we will allow His will to take over. And when we allow His will to take over, I used to think like I had to force work, right? And I realized that when I allow God's will to be in my work as well, it just aligns everything, and it starts to just move, and doors start to open instead of forcing things.
You have branding material too, which is kind of fly and dope. I know BC likes that. Talk about the what we call it, the apparel aspect of the movement, and how they can connect to that, and why is that important?
So
How do you wear it, in other words?
So you have to have product, right? You have to sell something in this country. If we're going to be a movement and if we're going to be about financial, you have to have a product. So it started with wanting to create a product that we could sell, that we could actually be the marketing that we wanted others to see, right? And then it goes from not just having product to a brand that we then really try to magnify this brand to the best of our abilities, right? And using all the talents that we have around us, or employing consultants and other talents to come in and say, hey, this is how we take this to the whole next level. And so you're gonna see actually in the future, we have a podcast, we're actually producing content, we're actually having partnerships with other corporate organizations, and we're in the process. And I'm very interested to see where these corporate partnerships are gonna go, especially with one corporation that has a TV aspect and has a platform. And if we can find a way to fuse what we do and put constant contact on that, we will really change the game.
I just want to again just thank Councilman James and Taryn for coming through and sharing not just their expertise but their experience and their testimony, which is not just a triple threat. They say, my grandmother used to say, never trust anyone who hasn't been through anything. And so I leave with saying, don't major in minor things. Learn from other people's mistakes, because you won't live long enough to make them all yourself. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know how to. And don't be afraid to ask for help, because this is an opportunity. On or about March 15th, 2021, we will announce the official process for this, and then begin to move forward. And we look forward to doing this each and every year. I also encourage you to lock into the We Don't Need Permission weekly podcast, right, Councilman James?
Yes.
Which is released on SoundCloud on Thursdays, and the visuals are released on Fridays. But I understand as of today, the podcast is too available on major streaming platforms such as Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes as of today. So if you are familiar with any of those particular areas, there's only one movement that is the movement, and that's We Don't Need Permission. You don't need permission. And if you think you do, pull up and holler at us. Right, Councilman?
Absolutely.